All right, everybody, welcome. This is the Stephen E. Kelley Show. My name is Stephen E. Kelley. This is Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio. It is Thursday night. I'm a little bit late. It is August 31st, 2017, last day of the month. We are going to finish the second part of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Last Thursday, we got to Chapter 12, and we're going to pick up right now at Chapter 13. We've only got 4 chapters, 13, 14, 15, and 16, so it shouldn't take that long. I have a couple of people here with me right now. Graham and Richard will probably join us after the show. And then, of course, we will have after hours tonight for those that want to stick around into the midnight hour. But without further ado, once again, we are 100% listener supported, so if you do appreciate this content, please do something and drop something in our PayPal, because we do need it, we do appreciate it, and we do thank you for every little bit that you can put in there. And of course, the PayPal can be found on our main page at www.truthcatradio.com, and the PayPal address is actually stephenkelly714@gmail.com. Please try to remember that. Also, make sure you say it's for friends and family so that they don't take anything out. Now, also, because of the nature of the content, I want to remind everybody that the station, of course, is... of course, it's my station, but everything that you hear is going to be the opinion of the person saying it, not have anything to do with the policy or opinions of the station, only of the person making them. I also want to say that the content information that we're given out tonight is only for information purposes only, and there is no distribution allowed of any kind of rebroadcast of a Truth Cat radio program, because it is all owned by Truth Cat. All right. So with that, we're going to do our best not to offend anybody, but try to be advised that this information is extremely important. It does apply to every single thing that's happening in the world at any given time. And if you don't think it is, you're just not paying attention. But this is truly the playbook for the entire world, and this is how everything is run up to now and way back when. This has been going on for hundreds of years. So, starting off right away with Chapter 13, number 1. The need for daily bread forces the Goyim to keep silence and be made our humble servants. Agents taken onto our press from among the Goyim will be at our orders to discuss anything which is inconvenient for us to issue directly in official documents. And in the meanwhile, quietly, amid the din of the discussion so raised, shall simply take and carry through such measures as we wish, and then offer them to the public as an accomplished fact. No one will dare to demand the abrogation of a matter once settled, all the more so as it will be represented as an improvement. And immediately the press will distract the current of thought towards new questions. Have we not trained people always to be seeking something new? Into the discussion of these new questions will throw themselves those of the brainless dispensers of fortunes who are not able even now to understand that they have not the remotest conception about the matters which they undertake to discuss. Questions of the political are unattainable for any of those who have guided it already for so many ages, the creators. From all of this, you will see that in securing the opinion of the mob, we are only facilitating the working of our machinery. And you may remark that it is not for actions, but for words issued by us on this or that question that we seem to seek approval. We are constantly making public declaration that we are guided in all our undertakings by the hope joined to the conviction that we are serving the common good. In order to distract people, this is a good subject. This chapter here is called We Deceive Workers. In order to distract people who may be too troublesome from discussions of questions of the political we are now putting forward, what we allege to be new questions of the political, namely questions of industry. In this sphere, let them discuss themselves silly. The masses are agreed to remain inactive, to take a rest from what they suppose to be political. which we train them to in order to use them as a means of combating the Goy governments, only on condition of being found new employments in which we are prescribing them something that looks like the same political objective, in order that the masses themselves may not guess what we are about. We further distract them with amusements, games, pastimes, passions, people's palaces. Soon we shall begin through the press to propose competitions in art, in sport of all kind. These interests will finally distract their minds from questions in which we should find ourselves compelled to oppose them. Growing more and more unaccustomed to reflect and form any opinion of their own, people will begin to talk in the same tone as we, because we alone shall be offering them new directions for thought. Of course, though, such persons as will not be suspected of solidarity with us. In other words, people that you don't think are really them, but they are, they pretend to be the enemy, controlled opposition. The part played by the liberals, utopian dreamers, will be finally played out when our government is acknowledged. Till such time, they will continue to do us good service. Therefore, we shall continue to direct their minds to all sorts of vain conceptions of fantastic theories, new and apparently progressive. For have we not, with complete success, tuned the brainless heads of the Goyim with progress, till there is not among the Goyim one mind able to perceive that under this world lies a departure from truth in all cases where it is not a question of material inventions, for truth is one, and in it there is no place for progress. Progress, like a fallacious idea, serves to obscure truth, so that none may know it except us, the chosen of God, its guardians. When we come into our kingdom, our orators will expound great problems which have turned humanity upside down in order to bring it at the end under our beneficent rule. Who will ever suspect that all these people were stage managed by us according to a political plan which no one has so much as guessed at in the course of many centuries? Protocol number 14. When we come into our kingdom, it will be undesirable for us that there should exist any other religion than ours, of the one God, with whom our destiny is bound up by our position as the chosen people, and through whom our same destiny is united with the destinies of the world. We must therefore sweep away all other forms of belief. If this gives birth to atheists, whom we see today, it will not, being only a transitional stage, interfere with our views, but will serve as a warning for those generations which will hearken to our preaching of the religion of Moses, that by its stable and thoroughly elaborate system has brought all the peoples of the world into subjection to us. Therein we shall emphasize its mystical right, on which, as we shall say, all its educative power is based. Then, at every possible opportunity, we shall publish articles in which we shall make comparisons between our beneficent rule and those of past ages. The blessings of tranquility, though it be a tranquility forcibly brought upon by centuries of agitation, will throw into higher relief the benefits to which we shall point. The errors of the Goyim governments will be depicted by us in the most vivid hues. We shall implant such abhorrence of them that the people will prefer tranquility in the state of serfdom to those rights of vaunted freedom which we have tortured humanity and exhausted the very resources of human existence, sources which have been exploited by a mob of rascally adventurers who know not what they do. Useless changes of forms of government to which we instigated the Goyim when we were undermining their state structures will have so wearied the people that by the time they will prefer to suffer anything under us rather than run the risk of enduring again all the agitations and miseries they have gone through. We shall forbid Christ. At the same time, we shall not omit to emphasize the historical mistakes of the Goy governments, which have tormented humanity for so many centuries by their lack of understanding of everything that constitutes the true good of humanity in their chase after fantastic schemes of social blessing, and have never noticed that these schemes kept on producing a worse and never a better state of the universal relations which are the basis of human life. The whole force of our principles and methods will lie in the fact that we shall present them and expound them as a splendid contrast to the dead and decomposed old order of things in social life. Our philosophers will discuss all of the shortcomings of the various beliefs of the Goyim, but no one will ever bring under discussion our faith from its true point of view, since this will be fully learned by none save ours, who will never dare to betray its secrets. In countries known as progressive and enlightened, we have created a senseless, filthy, abominable literature. For some time after our entrance to power, we shall continue to encourage its existence in order to provide a telling relief by contrast to the speeches party program which will be distributed from exalted quarters of ours. Our wise men, trained to become leaders of the Goyim, will compose speeches, projects, memoirs, articles, which will be used by us to influence the minds of the Goyim, directing them towards such understanding as forms of knowledge as have been determined by us. Protocol number 15. When we at last definitely come into our kingdom by the aid of coups d'etats, prepared everywhere for one and the same day, after definitely acknowledged, and not a little time will pass before that comes about, perhaps even a whole century, we shall make it our task to see that against us such things as plots shall no longer exist. With this purpose, we shall slay without mercy all who take arms. Kind of like Waco, Randy Weaver, Port Arthur, Oklahoma, yada, 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 to oppose our coming into our kingdom. Every kind of new institution of anything like a secret society will also be punished with death. Those of them which are now in existence, as known to us, serve us and have served us. We shall disband and send into exile to continents far removed from Europe. In this way, we shall proceed with those Goy Masons who know too much. Such of these as we may for some reason spare will be kept in constant fear of exile. We shall promulgate a new law, making all former members of secret societies liable to exile from Europe as the center rule. Resolution of our government will be final without appeal. In the Goy societies in which we have planted and deeply rooted discord and Protestantism, the only possible way of restoring order is to employ merciless measures that prove the direct force of authority. No regard must be paid to victims who fall. They suffer for the well-being of the future. The attainment of that well-being, even at the expense of sacrifices, is the duty of any kind of government that acknowledges as justification for its existence not only its privileges, but its obligations. The principal guarantee of stability, of rule, is to confirm the areole of power. And this areole is attained only by such majestic inflexibility of might as shall carry on its face the emblems of inviolable from the mystical causes, from the choice of God. Such was, until recent times, the Russian aristocracy, and the one and only serious foe we had in the world, without counting the papacy. Bear in mind the example when Italy, drenched with blood, never touched a hair of the head of Sulla, who had poured forth that blood. Sulla enjoyed a apotheosis for his might in him, but his intrepid return to Italy ringed him around with inviolability. The people who do not lay a finger on him, who hypnotizes them by his daring and strength of mind. Secret societies. Meanwhile, however, until we come into our kingdom, we shall act in a contrary way. We shall create and multiply free Masonic lodges in all countries of the world, absorb into them all who may become of or who are prominent in public activity. For these lodges we shall find our principal intelligence office and means of influence. All of these lodges shall bring under one central administration, known to us alone, and to all others absolutely unknown, which will be composed of our learned elders. The lodges will have their representatives who will serve to screen the above-mentioned administration of Masonry, and from whom will issue the watchword and program. In these lodges we shall tie together the knot which binds together all revolutionary and liberal elements. Their composition will be made up of all strata of society. The most secret political plots will be known to us and fall under our guiding hands on the very day of their conception. Among the members of these lodges will be almost all of the agents of international and national police, since their service is for us irreplaceable, in the respect that the police is in a position not only to use its own particular measures with the insubordinate, but also to screen our activities and provide pretexts for discontents, etc. Number 5. The class of the people who most willingly enter into secret societies are those who live by their wits, careerists, and, in general, people most light-minded, with whom we shall have no difficulty in dealing and in using to wind up the mechanism of the machine devised by us. If this world grows agitated, the meaning of that will be that we have had to stir it up in order to break up its too great solidarity. But if there should arise in its midst a plot, then at the head of that plot will be no other than one of our most trusted servants. It is natural that we and no other should lead Masonic activities, for we know whether we are leading, and we know the final goal of every form of activity, whereas the Goyim have knowledge of nothing, not even the immediate effective action they put before themselves. Usually, the momentary reckoning of their satisfaction, of their self-opinion in the accomplishment of their thought, without even remarking at the very conception never belonging to their initiative, but to our instigation of their thought. Gentiles are stupid. The goyim enter the lodges out of curiosity or in the hope by their means to get a nibble at the public pie. And some of them, in order to obtain a hearing before the public for their impractical and groundless fantasies, they thirst for the emotion of success and applause, of which we are remarkably generous. And the reason why we give them this success is to make use of the high conceit of themselves to which it gives birth. For that insensibly disposes them to assimilate our suggestions without being on their guard against them in the fullness of their confidence that it is our own infallibility which is giving utterance to their own thoughts, and that it is impossible for them to borrow those of others. You can't imagine to what extent the wisest of the goyim can be brought to a state of unconscious naivete in the presence of this condition of high conceit of themselves, and at the same time how easy it is to take the heart out of them by the slightest ill success, though it be nothing more than the stoppage of the applause they had, and to reduce them to their slavish submission for the sake of winning a renewal of success. By so much as our disregard success, if only they can carry through their plans, by so much the goyim are willing to sacrifice any plans only to have success. This psychology of theirs materially felicitates for us the task of setting them in the required direction. These tigers, in appearance, have the souls of sheep, and the wind blows freely through their heads. We have set them on the hobby horse of an idea about the absorption of individuality by the symbolic unit of collectivism. They have never yet and never will have the sense to reflect that this hobby horse is a manifest violation of the most important law of nature, which has established from the very creation of the world one unit unlike another, and precisely for the purpose of instituting individuality. There's your free speech. If we have been able to bring them to such a pitch of stupid blindness, is it not a proof, an amazingly clear proof, of the degrees to which the mind of the goyim is undeveloped in comparison to our mind? This it is mainly which guarantees our success. Gentiles are cattle. And how far-seeing were our learned elders in ancient times when they said that to attain a serious end, it behooves not to stop at any means or to count the victims sacrificed for the sake of that end. We have not counted the victims of the seed of the goy cattle, though we have sacrificed many of our own. But for that, we have already given them such a position on earth that they could not have dreamed of. The comparatively small number of the victims from the number of ours has preserved our nationality from destruction. Holocaust. Death is the inevitable end for all. It is better to bring that end nearer to those who hinder our affairs than to ourselves, to the founders of this affair. We execute Masons in such way that none save the Brotherhood can ever have a suspicion of it, not even the victims themselves of our death sentence. They all die when required, as if from a normal kind of illness. Knowing this, even the Brotherhood, in its turn, dare not protest. By such methods, we have plucked out of our midst of masonry the very root of protest against our disposition. While preaching liberalism to the Goy, we, at the time, keep our own people and our own agents in a state of unquestioning submission. Under our influence, the execution of the laws of the Goyim have been reduced to a minimum. The prestige of the law has been exploded by the liberal interpretations introduced into the sphere. In the most important and fundamental affairs and questions, judges decide as we dictate to them. See matters in the light wherewith we enfold them. For the administration of the Goyim, of course, through persons who are our tools, though we do not appear to have anything in common with them, by newspaper opinion or by other means. Even senators and the higher administration accept our counsels. The purely brute mind of the Goyim is incapable of use for analysis and observation, and still more for the foreseeing whither a certain manner of setting a question may tend. All right, this is the use of language here. This is what I was trying to tell you. It's very important how you use language. This is what they're trying to say here. In this difference in capacity for thought between the Goyim and ourselves may be clearly discerned the seal of our positions as the chosen people and of our higher quality of humanness. In contradiction to the brute mind of the Goyim, their eyes are open but see nothing before them and do not invent, except perhaps material things. From this it is plain that nature herself has destined us to guide and rule the world. We demand submission. When comes the time of our overt rule, the time to manifest its blessing, we shall remake all legislatures. All our laws will be brief, plain, stable, without any kind of interpretations, so that anyone will be in a position to know them perfectly. The main feature will be run right through them is submission to orders, and this principle will be carried to the grandiose height. Every abuse will then disappear in consequence of the responsibility of all down to the lowest unit before the higher authority of the representative of power. Abuses of power subordinate to this last instance will be so mercilessly punished that none will be found anxious to try experiments with their own power. We shall follow up jealously every action of the administration on which depends the smooth running of the machinery of state, for slackness in this produces slackness everywhere. Not a single case of illegality or abuse of power will be left without exemplary punishment. Concealment of guilt, connivance between those in service of the administration, all of this kind of evil will disappear after the very first examples of such punishment. The aureole of our power demands suitable that it is cruel punishments for the slightest infringement for the sake of gain of its supreme prestige. The sufferer, through his punishment, though his punishment may exceed his fault, will count as a soldier falling upon the administrative field of battle in the interest of authority, principle, and law, which do not permit that any of those who hold the reins of the public coach, should turn aside from the public highway to their own private path. For examples, our judges will know that whenever they feel disposed to plume themselves on foolish clemency, they are violating the law of justice, which will be instituted for the exemplary edification of men by penalties for lapses, and will not for the display of spiritual quality of the judges. Such qualities it is proper to show in private life, but not in a public square, which is the educational basis of human life. Our legal staff will serve not beyond the age of 55. Firstly, because old men more obstinately hold to prejudiced opinion and are less capable of submitting to new directions. And secondly, because this will give us the possibility of this measure of securing elasticity in the changing of staff, which thus will be more easily bent under our pressure. He who wishes to keep his place will have to give blind obedience to deserve it. In general, our judges will be elected only by us, only from among those who thoroughly understand that the part they have to play is to punish and apply laws, and not to dream about the manifestation of liberalism at the expense of the educational scheme of the state, as the Goyim in these days imagine it to be. This method of shuffling the staff will serve also to explode any collective solidarity of those in the same service, and will bind all to the interest of the government upon which their fate will depend. The young generations of judges will be trained in certain views regarding the inadmissibility of any abuses which might disturb the established order of our subjects among themselves. In these days, the judges of the Goyim create indulgences to every kinds of crime, not having a just understanding of their office, because the rulers at the present age, in appointing judges to office, take no care to inoculate in them a sense of duty and consciousness as a matter which is demanded of them. As a brute beast lets out its young in search of prey, so do the Goyim to give them for what purpose such place was created. This is the reason why their governments are being so ruined by their own forces through the acts of their own admission. Let us borrow from the example of the results of these actions yet another lesson for our government. We shall root out liberalism from all the important strategic posts of our government, on which depend the training of subordinates for our state structure. Such posts will fall exclusively to those who have been trained by us for administrative rule. To the possible objection that the retirement of old servants will cost the Treasury heavily, I reply, firstly, they will be provided with some private service in place of what they lose, and secondly, I will have to remark that all the money in the world will be concentrated in our hands. Consequently, it is not our government that has to fear expense. We shall be cruel. Our absolutism will in all things be logically consecutive, and therefore in each one of its decrees our supreme will must be respected and unquestionably fulfilled. It will ignore all murmurs, all discontents of every kind, and will destroy to the root every kind of manifestation of them in act by punishment of an exemplary character. We shall abolish the right of appeal, which will be transferred exclusively to our disposal, to the cognizance of him who rules, for we must not allow the conception among the people of a thought that there could be such a thing as a decision that is not right of judges set up by us. If, however, anything like this should occur, we shall ourselves squash the decision, but inflict herewith such exemplary punishment on the judge for lack of understanding of his duty and purpose of his appointment as will prevent a repetition of such cases. I repeat that it must be borne in mind that we shall know every step of our administration, which only needs to be closely watched for the people to be content with us, for it has the right to demand from a good government a good official. Our governments will have the appearance of a patriarchal, paternal guardianship on the part of our ruler. Our own nation and our subjects will discern in his person a father caring for their every need, their every act, their every interrelation as subjects one with another, as well as their relation to their ruler. They will then be so thoroughly imbued with the thought that it is impossible for them to dispense without the wardship and guidance, if they wish to live in that peace and quiet, that they will acknowledge this autocracy of our ruler with a devotion bordering on apotheosis, especially when they are convinced that those by whom we set up are not put in their place by authority, but only blindly executes his... Wait, hang on, let me say that again. Especially when they are convinced that those whom we set up do not put their own in place of authority, but only blindly execute his dictates. They will be rejoiced that we have regulated everything in their lives as if done by wise parents who desire to train their children in the cause of duty and submission. For the peoples of the world, in regards to the secret of our polity, are ever through the ages only children under age, precisely as also their governments. As you see, I found our despotism on right and duty. The right to compel the execution of duty is the direct obligation of a government which is the father for its subjects. It has the right of a strong that it may use the benefit of directing humanity towards that order which is defined by nature, namely submission. Everything in the world is in a state of submission, if not man, then to the circumstances of its own inner character, in all cases to what is stronger. And so shall we be this something stronger for the sake of good. We are obligated without hesitation to sacrifice individuals who commit a breach of established order. For in the exemplary punishment of evil lies a great educational problem. When the king of Israel sets upon his sacred head the crown offered him by Europe, he will become patriarch of the world. Antichrist, the indispensable victims offered by him in consequence of their suitability will never reach the number of victims offered in the course of centuries by the mania of magnificence, the emulation between the Goy governments. Our king will be in constant communion with the people, making to them from the tribune speeches which fame will in that same hour distribute all over the world. In other words, what they're saying here, and this is really important, is that the amount of humans that they will offer as a human sacrifice to the Antichrist will be small in comparison to all the humans killed in the wars of the periods leading up to the return of the Antichrist. And we're supposed to think that's a good thing. Protocol number 16. In order to effect the destruction of all collective forces except ours, we shall emasculate the first stage of collectivism, the universities, by re-educating them in a new direction. Their officials and professors will be prepared for their business by detailed secret programs of action from which they will not with impunity diverge, not by one iota. They will be appointed with special precaution and will be so placed as to be wholly dependent upon the government. Sounds pretty realistic to me. We shall exclude from the course of instruction state law, as also all that concerns the political question. These subjects will be taught to a few dozen of persons chosen for their preeminent capacities from among the number of initiated. Bill Clinton, what was that university he went to? Yeah. We shall exclude from the course of instruction The subjects will be taught to a few dozen people in their preeminent capacities. The universities must no longer send out from their halls milksops concocting plans for a constitution like a comedy or a tragedy, busying themselves with questions of policy in which even their own fathers never had any power of thought. The ill-guided acquaintance of a large number of persons with questions of polity creates utopian dreamers and bad subjects. As you can see for yourselves from the example of the universal education in this direction of the Goyim, we must introduce into their education all those principles which have so brilliantly broken up their order. But when we are in power, we shall remove every kind of disturbing subject from the course of education and shall make out of the youth obedient children of authority, loving him who rules as the support and hope of peace and quiet. We shall change history. Classicism, as also any form of study of ancient history in which there are more bad than good examples, we shall replace with a study of programs of the future. We shall erase from the memory of men all facts of previous centuries, ISIS, which are undesirable to us, Confederate statues, and leave only those which depict all of the errors of the government of the Goyim. Graham, mute yourself.
Sorry.
The study of practical life, of the obligation of order, of the relationship of the people one to another, of avoiding bad and selfish examples which spread the infection of evil, and similar questions of an educative nature will stand in the forefront of the teaching program, which be drawn up upon a separate plan for each calling of or state of life, and in no wise generalizing the teaching. This treatment of the question has special importance. Each state of life must also be trained within strict limits corresponding to its destination and work in life. The occasional genius has always managed and always will manage to slip through into other states of life, but it is the most perfect folly for the sake of this rare occasional genius to let through into ranks foreign to them the untalented, who thus rob of their places those who belong to those ranks by birth or employment. You know what you're talking. You know what I'm saying here. You know yourselves in what all this has ended for the Goyim who allowed this crying absurdity. Like Kennedy is a good example. In order that he who rules may be firmly seated in the hearts and minds of his subjects, it is necessary for the time of his activities to instruct the whole nation in the schools and the marketplace about this meaning and his acts and all his beneficent initiatives. We shall abolish every kind of freedom of instruction. Learners of all ages have the right to assemble together with their parents in the educational establishments, as it were in a club. During these assemblies on holidays, teachers will read what will pass as free lectures on questions of human relations, of laws of example, of the philosophy of new theories not yet declared to the world. These theories will be raised by us to the stage of a dogma of faith, as a traditional stage towards our faith. On the completion of this exposition of our program of action in the present and in the future, I will read you the principles of these theories. In a word, knowing by the experiences of many centuries that people live and are guided by ideas, that these ideas are imbibed by people only by the aid of education, provided with equal success for all ages of growth, but of course by varying methods. We shall swallow up and confiscate to our own use the last scintilla of independent thought, which we have for so long past been directing towards subjects and ideas useful to us. The system of bridling, though thought is already at work in the so-called system of teaching by object lesson, the purpose of which is to turn goyim into unthinking, submissive brutes, waiting for things to be presented before their own eyes in order to form an idea of them. In France, one of our greatest agents, our Bourgeois, has already made public new programs for teaching object lessons. Number 17. The practice of advocacy produces men cold, cruel, persistent, unprincipled, who in all cases take up an unpersonal, purely legal standpoint. They have the that's an old word, habit of, they refer to everything to its value for the defense and not to the public welfare of its results. They do not usually decline to undertake any defense whatsoever. They strive for an acquittal at all costs, caving to every petty crux or of jurisprudence, and thereby they demoralize justice. For this reason, we shall set this profession into narrow frames which will keep inside its sphere of executive public service. Advocates, equally with judges, will be deprived of the right of communication with litigants. They will receive business only from the court, public defenders, and will study it by notes of reports and documents. Crime report. Defending their clients after they have been interrogated in court on facts that have appeared. They will receive an honorarium without regard to the quality of defense. This will render them mere reporters of law and in the interests of judgment, and as a counterpoint to the protractor, the prosecutor, who will be the reporter in the interest of the prosecution. This will shorten business before the courts. In this way will be established a practice of honest, unprejudiced defense conducted not from personal interest but by conviction. This will also by way remove the present practice of corrupt bargain between advocation to agree only to let that side win which pays the most. Kind of sounds like what we have. We shall destroy the clergy. We have long past taken care to discredit the priesthood of the Goyim and thereby to ruin their mission on earth, which in these days might still be a great hindrance to us. Day by day, its influence on the peoples of the world is falling lower. Freedom of conscience has been declared everywhere, so that now only years divide us from the moment of complete wrecking of that Christian religion. As to other religions, we shall have a little less difficulty in dealing with them, but it would be premature to speak of this now. We shall set clericalism and clerics into such narrow frames as to make their influence move in retrogressive proportions to its former progress. When the time comes finally to destroy the papal court, the finger of an invisible hand will point the nations toward this court. When, however, the nations fling themselves upon it, we shall come forward in the guise of its defenders, as if to save excessive bloodshed. In other words, oh, please, please, don't kill the Catholic priest. Spare them. Have mercy. The rabbis will come to the defense of the priests, of the Catholics. But by this diversion, we shall penetrate to its very bowels and be sure we shall never come out again until we have gnawed through the entire strength of this place. The King of all Jews will be the real Pope of the universe, the Patriarch of the international church. What does that make the King of all Jews? But in the meantime, while we are re-educating youth in new traditional religions and afterwards in ours, We shall not overtly lay a finger on existing churches, but we shall fight against them by criticism calculated to reduce schism. In general, then, our contemporary press will continue to convict state affairs, religions, incapacities of the Goyim, always using the most unprincipled expressions in order by every means to lower their prestige and manner. In other words, they're going to talk shit and they're going to degrade it with the foulest language possible, kind of like they're doing now. Our kingdom will be an apologia of the divinity Vishnu, in whom is found its personification. In our 100 hands will be one in each the springs of the machinery of social life. We shall see everything without the aid of official police in that scope of its rights. We elaborated for the use of the Goyim. Oh, wow. Hey, hang on a second here. Richard, give me a break for a second. You guys, I'm going to start this chapter over, but I need to take a break real quick. Okay, Richard? Can you do that for me? Unmute, Richard.
Yeah.
All right, give us a break. I'm going to mute.
Okay, well, hello, everyone. You're listening to Truth Cat Radio, and this is the Stephen D. Kelley Show. And we're covering the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, which is a very good read. You know, I mean, this if you look at a lot of what we have going on currently in the world and the Western world here in America, over where Graham is in Europe as well, I mean, it's really uncanny. I think no one could disagree. At the very least, it's very uncanny just how much of, what Stephen is covering here, well, what is in the protocols, in its entirety, really, is going on in the current era is being ramped up to such large proportions. It's really interesting how much detail, and so many people have claimed that the protocols were a forgery. But yet, when you look at the amount of detail, just try to imagine that in reality, okay? The time period it's written. I mean, a lot of this has come more into fruition, considerably so, since the time it was written, even in very recent times. And as we hear this read by Stephen today and last week, there's no denying that. I mean, no matter what your stance is on some of these political or social issues out there is no denying that much of what is in here is being ramped up and very much employed to such fine detail. I mean, virtually everything that we're hearing here in this text. So for someone to suggest it is a forgery, I think you really have to put it in perspective and imagine the time period it's written. Even in the conjecture of it being a forgery, and just imagine, being able to, a lot of which is actually being predicted, but truly coming to fruition in the current era. Yeah, thank you, Steve.
I was watching my iced tea turning into melted ice water, and I thought I'm going to put it in the refrigerator so that maybe after the show I could at least have, I hate that. I'm sitting here talking. I'm watching my ice melt. That's what we do. All right, let me just try to get back in here. We're actually on the final chapter, I think. I think that's it. Well, no, there's one more. Protocol 19, Protocol 20. There's 24 protocols. Oh my God! I'm gonna have to blast to get through this shit. Let's see. Okay, where are we? Protocol. We were on. Protocol 18. Does that sound right? Or no? Destroy the clergy. That's right. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. Let's see. Our agents will be taken from the higher as well as the lower ranks of society, from among the administrative class who will spend their time in amusements editors, printers and publishers, booksellers, clerks and salesmen, workmen, coachmen, lackeys, etc. This body, having no rights and not being empowered to take any action on their own account, and consequently a police without any power, will only witness and report. Verification of their reports and arrests will depend upon a responsible group of controllers of police affairs, while the actual arrest will be performed by the gendarme and the municipal police. Any person not denouncing anything seen or heard concerning questions of polity will also be charged with and made responsible for concealment. Sounds like the secret police, if it is proved that he is guilty of this crime. Just as nowadays our brethren are obligated at their own risk to denounce all of the Kalal apostates of their own family, our members who have been noticed doing anything in opposition to the Kahal, whatever the hell that is, so in our kingdom over all of the world, it will be obligatory for all of our subjects to observe the duty of service to the state in this direction. Such an organization will extirpate abuses of authority, of force, of bribery, everything. In fact, we, by our counsels, by our theories of the superhuman rights of man, have introduced into the customs of the Goyim. But how else were we to procure that increase of causes predisposing our disorders in the midst of their administrations? Among the number of those methods, one of the most important is agents for the restoration of order, so placed as to have the opportunity in their disintegrating activity of development and displaying of evil inclinations, obstinate self-conceit, irresponsible exercise of authority, and first and foremost, venality. Sound like Janet Reno? When it becomes necessary for us, protocol number 18, when it becomes necessary for us to strengthen the strict measures of secret defense, the most fatal poison for the prestige of authority, we shall arrange a simulation of disorders and some manifestation of discontents, rally march, finding expression through the cooperation of good speakers, soapboxes. Round these speakers will assemble all who are sympathetic to his utterances. This will give us the pretext for a domiciliary prerequisitions and surveillance, as on part of our servants from among the number of the Goyim police. As the majority of conspirators act out of love for the game, for the sake of talking, so until they commit some overt act, shall we not lay a finger on them, but only introduce into their midst observation elements. It must be remembered that the prestige of authority is lessened if it is frequently discovers conspiracies against itself. This implies a presumption of consciousness of weakness, or what is still worse, of injustice. You are aware that we have broken the prestige of the Goy kings by frequent attempts upon their lives through our agents, blind sheep of our flock who are easily moved, Sirhan, Squeaky Fromm, who are easily moved by a few liberal phrases, to crimes, provided only that they be painted in political colors. We have compelled the rulers to acknowledge their weakness in advertising overt measures of secret defense, Secret Service, and thereby we shall bring the promise of authority to destruction. Our rulers will be secretly protected. In other words, they're not going to have a big public secret service. They're going to look like they don't need protection. Our rulers will be secretly protected only by the most insignificant guard, because we shall not permit so much as a thought that there could exist against him any sedition with which he is not strong enough to contend, and which is compelled to hide from. If we should admit this thought, as the Goyim have done and are doing, we should ipso facto be signing a death sentence. if not for our ruler, for any rate for his dynasty at no distant date. Okay, there you go. There's their poison right there. Okay, you want to know how to kill them? That's how you do it right there. Government by fear. According to strictly enforced outward appearances, our ruler will employ his power only for the advantage of the nation and in no way for his own dynastic profits, like Trump. Therefore, with the observance of this decorum, his authority will be respected and guarded by the subjects themselves. It will receive the apotheosis in the admission that with it is bound up the well-being of every citizen of state, for upon it will depend all order in the common life of the pack. Kind of like the way Assad is in Syria. They love him. Overt defenses of this kind argues weakness in the organization of his strength. Sun Tzu, Art of War. From a position of weakness, feign strength. From a position of strength, feign weakness. Our ruler will always be among the people and be surrounded by a mob of apparently curious men and women who will occupy the front ranks about him to all appearances by chance and will restrain the ranks of the rest out of respect as it will appear for good order. This will show an example of restraint also in others. If a petitioner appears among the people trying to hand a petition, forcing his way through the ranks, the first ranks will receive the petition and before the eyes of the petitioner pass it to the ruler, so that all may know that what is handed in reaches its destination, that consequently there exists a control of the ruler himself. This areole of power, and what is an areole? It's a little round area around the nipple, okay? The leader's the nipple. This is the areole we're talking about now, the people around the nipple. This areole of power requires for his existence that the people may be able to say, if the king knew of this, or the king will hear it. With the establishment of the official defense, the mystical prestige of authority disappears. Given a certain audacity, and everyone counts himself master of it, the sedition monger is conscious of his strength, and when occasion serves, watches for the moment to make an attempt upon authority, like we're doing right now. For the Goyim, we have been preaching something else, but by that very fact, we are enabled to see what measures of overt defense have brought them to. Criminals with us will be arrested at the first, more or less, well-grounded suspicion. It cannot be allowed out of fear of a possible mistake. An opportunity should be given of escape to persons suspected of a political lapse of crime. For in these matters we shall be literally merciless. If it is still possible, by stretching a point to admit a reconsideration of the motive cause in simple crimes, there is no possibility of excuse for persons occupying themselves with a question in which nobody except the government can understand anything. And it is not all governments that understand true policy. Protocol 19. If we do not permit any independent dabbling in the political, we shall, on the other hand, encourage every kind of report or petition with proposals for the government to examine into all kinds of projects for the amelioration of the condition of the people. This will reveal to us the defects or else the fantasies of our subjects, to which we shall respond either by accomplishing them by a wise rebutment to prove the short-sightedness of one who judges wrongly. Sedition mongering is nothing more than the yapping of a lapdog at an elephant. For a government well organized, not from police but also from a public point of view, the lapdog yaps at the elephant in entire unconsciousness of its strength and importance. It needs no more than to take a good example to show the relative importance of both, and the lapdog will cease to yap and will wag their tails at the moment they set eyes on the elephant. In order to destroy the prestige of heroism for political crime, we shall send it for trial in the category of thieving, murder, and every kind of abominable filth. Oklahoma City. Let's not forget Oklahoma City. Public opinion will then confuse in its conception this category of crime with a disgrace attaching to every other, and will brand it with the same contempt. We have done our best, and I hope we have succeeded to obtain that the Goyim should not arrive at this means of contending with sedition. In other words, this is exactly what we need to do. They're telling us what they hope we don't do. It was for this reason that through the press and in speeches, indirectly in cleverly compiled school books on history, we have advertised the martyrdom alleged to have been accredited by sedition mongers for the idea of the Commonwealth. Let me see, that sounds like Guy Fawkes, maybe, huh? This advertisement has increased the contingent of liberals and has brought thousands of Goyim into the ranks of our livestock cattle. Number 20. Today we shall touch upon the financial program, which I put off to the end of my report as being the most difficult, the crowning and decisive point of our plans. Before entering it, I will remind you that I have already spoken before by way of hint when I said that the sum total of our actions is settled by the question of figures. When we come into our kingdom, our autocratic government will avoid, from a principle of self-preservation, sensibly burdening the masses of the people with taxes, remembering that it plays the part of father and protector. But as state organization costs dear, it is necessary nevertheless to obtain funds required for it. It will be therefore elaborate with particular precaution the question of equilibrium in this matter. Our rule, in which the king will enjoy the legal fiction that everything in his state belongs to him, which may easily be translated into fact, will be enabled to resort to the lawful confiscation of all sums of every kind for the regulation of their circulation in the state. From this follows that taxation will best be covered by a progressive tax on property. In this manner, the dues will be paid without straightening or ruining anybody in the form of a percentage of the amount of property. The rich must be aware that it is their duty to place part of their superfluities at the disposal of the state, since the state guarantees them security of possession of the rest of their property and the right of honest gain. I say honest, for the control over property will do away with robbery on a legal basis. This social reform must come from above, for the time it is ripe. For the time is ripe for it. It is indispensable as a pledge of peace. All right, this is really important. We shall destroy capital. Uh-oh. Did I lose here? Let me just check. Bring him back. Oh, Graham probably lost his internet. All right, no big. Graham will come back if he needs to. We shall destroy capital. The tax upon the poor man is a seed of revolution and works to the detriment of the state, which is hunting after a trifling, is missing the big. Quite apart from this, a tax on the capitalist diminishes growth of wealth in private hands, in which we have in these days concentrated it as a counterpoint to the government strength of the Goyim, their state finances. A tax increasing the percentage ratio to capital will give much larger revenue than the present individual property tax, which is useful to us now for the sole reason that it excites trouble and discontent among the Goyim. We now know this as the 16th Amendment. The force upon which our king will rest depends in the equilibrium and guarantee of peace, for the sake of which things it is indispensable that the capitalists should yield up a portion of their incomes for the sake of secure workings of machinery of state. State needs to be paid by those who will not feel the burden and will have enough to take from. Such a measure will destroy the hatred of the poor man for the rich, in whom we will see a necessary financial support from the state. We'll see in him the organizer of peace and well-being, since he sounds like Bill Gates, since he will see that it is the rich man who is paying the necessary means to attain these things. Zuckerberg. In order that payers of the educated classes should not too much distress themselves over the new payments, they will have full accounts given them of the destination of those payments, with the exception of such sums as will be appropriated for the needs of the throne and the administrative institutions. He who reigns will not have any properties of his own, since all the state represents his patrimony, or else the one that would be in contradiction of the other. In fact, holding in private means would destroy the right of property in the common possession of all. Relatives of him who reign. Okay, did I lose that time? That was Richard. Oh, I guess these guys probably want to hang up. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Relatives of those who reign. Where was that? Relatives of him who reigns, his heirs accepted, will who be maintained by the resources of the state must enter the ranks of servants of the state, or must work to obtain the right to property. The privilege of royal blood must not serve for the spoiling of the treasury. Purchase, receipt of money, or inheritance will be subject to the payment of the stamp progressive tax. Any transfer of property which, whether money or other, without evidence of payment of this tax will be strictly registered by names, will render the former holder liable to pay interest on the tax from the moment of the transfer of these sums up to the discovery of his evasion of the declaration of the transfer. Transfer documents must be presented weekly at a local treasury office with notifications of the name, surname, and permanent place of residence of the former and the new holder of this property. This transfer will register the names and must begin with a definite sum which exceeds the ordinary expenses of buying and selling necessaries, and these will be subject to payment only by a stamp impost of the definite percentage of the unit. Just strike an estimate of how many times such taxes as these will recover the revenue of the Goyim states. We cause depression. The state ex-week here, or tax collector, will have to maintain a definite complement of reserve sums, and all of it is collected above the complement must be returned into circulation. On these sums will be organized public works. The initiative of works of this kind proceeding from state sources will bind the working class firmly to the interests of the state and those who reign. From these same sums will also be part of the set aside as rewards of inventiveness and productiveness. On no account should so much as a single unit above the definite and freely estimated sums be retained in state treasuries, for money exists to be circulated, and any kind of stagnation of money acts ruinously on the running of state machinery, for which it is the lubricant. A stagnation of the lubricant may stop the regular working of the mechanism. The substitution of interest-bearing paper for a sake of token of exchange has produced exactly this stagnation. The consequences of this circumstances are already sufficiently noticeable. A court of account will also be instituted by us, and in it the ruler will find at any moment a full accounting for state income and expenditure, with the exception of the current monthly account not yet made up, and that of the preceding month, which will not yet have been delivered. The one and only person who will have no interest in robbing the state is its owner, the ruler. This is why his personal control will remove the possibility of leakages or extravagances. The representative function of this ruler at the reception for the sake of etiquette, which absorbs so much invaluable time, will be abolished in order that the ruler may have time for control and consideration. His power will not then be split up into fractional parts amongst time-serving favorites who surround the throne for its pomp and splendor, and are interested only in their own and not in the common interest of the state. Economic crises have been produced by us for the Goyim by no other means than the withdrawal of money from circulation. Huge capitals have stagnated, withdrawing money from states which are constantly obligated to pay to those same stagnant capitals for loans. These loans burden the finances of the state with the payment of interest and made them the bond slaves of these capitals. The concentration of industry in the hands of the capitalists, out of the hands of small masters, has drained away all of the juices of the people, and within them also the states. This is what is now called the Federal Reserve. The present issue of money in general does not correspond to the requirements per head and cannot therefore satisfy all the needs of the worker. The issue of money ought to correspond with the growth of population, and thereby children must also absolutely be reckoned as consumers of currency from the day of their birth. The revision of issue is a material question for the whole world. You are aware that the gold standard has been the ruin of the states which adopted it, for it has not been able to satisfy the demands for money, the more so that we have removed gold from circulation as far as possible. With us, the standards that must be introduced is the cost of the working man power. Whether it be reckoned in paper or in wood, we shall make the issue of money in accordance with the normal requirements of each subject according to the quantity of every birth and subtracting every death. This is exactly what Hitler did, and this is exactly what the colonists did prior to the American Revolution. The accounts will be managed by each department. In order that there may be no delays in paying out of state money, needs of the sums and terms of such payments will be fixed by decree of the ruler. This will do away with the protection by a ministry of one institution to the detriment of others. The budgets of income and expenditure will be carried out side by side, that they not be obscured by distance one to the other. The reforms projected by us in the financial institutions and principalities of the Goyams will be clothed by us in such forms as will alarm nobody. We shall point out the necessity of reforms in consequence of the disorderly darkness into which the Goyim, by their own irregularities, have plunged the finances. The first irregularity we shall point out consists in their beginning with drawing up a single budget, which year after year grows, owing to the following cause. The budget is dragging out to half the year, and then they demand a budget to put things right, as they expend in 3 months, after which they ask for a supplementary budget. And after all, this ends with a liquidation budget. But as the budget of the following year is drawn up in accordance with the sum of the total addition, the annual departure from the normal reaches as much as 50% per year, and the annual budget is trebled in 10 years. Thanks to such methods allowed by the carelessness of the Goy states, their treasuries are empty. The period of loans supervenes, and that has swallowed up the remainders and brought all of the Goy states to bankruptcy. You understand perfectly that economic arrangements of this kind, which have been suggested to the Goyim by us, cannot be carried on by us. Every kind of loan proves infirmity in the state and want of understanding of the rights of states. Loans hang like a sword, the sword of Damocles, over the head of rulers, who instead of taking from their subjects by temporary tax, come begging with outstretched palms to our bankers. Foreign loans are leeches which there is no possibility of removing from the body of the state until they fall off themselves, or the state flings them off, like Hitler did. But the Goy states do not tear them off. They go on persisting in putting more onto themselves, so that they must inevitably perish, drained by voluntary bloodletting. The tyranny of usury. What also, indeed, is substance, a loan, especially a foreign loan. A loan is an issue of government bills of exchange containing a percentage of obligation commensurate to the sum of the loan capital. If the loan bears a charge of 5%, then in 20 years the state vainly pays away in interest the sum equal to the loan borrowed. In 40 years, it is paying a double sum, in 60 treble. And all the while, the debt remains an unpaid debt. From this calculation, it is obvious that any form of taxation per head of the state is bailing out the largest coffers of the poor taxpayers in order to settle accounts with wealthy foreigners, from whom it has borrowed money instead of collecting these coffers from its own needs without additional interest. So long as loans were internal to the goyim and only shuffled their money from the pockets of the poor to those of the rich, but when we brought up the necessary persons in order to transfer loans into the external sphere, Woodrow Wilson, FDR, all the wealth of the states flowed into our cash boxes, and all the goyim began paying to us the tribute of subjects. The superficiality of the Goy kings on their thrones in regard to state affairs and the venality of ministers, or the want of understanding of financial matters on the part of the other ruling persons, have made their countries debtors to our treasuries to amounts quite impossible to pay. It has not been accomplished without, on our part, heavy expenditures of trouble and money. Stagnation of money will not be allowed by us, and therefore there will be no state interest-bearing paper except a 1% series, so that there will be no payment of interest to leeches that suck all the strength out of the state. No Rothschilds. The right to issue interest-bearing paper will be given exclusively to industrial companies who find no difficulty in paying interest out of profits, whereas the state does not make interest on borrowed money like these companies, for the state borrows to spend and not to use in operations. Industrial papers will also be bought by the governments, which from the being now as paper of tribute by loan operations will be transferred into a lender of money at a profit. This measure will stop the stagnation of money, parasitic profits, and idleness, all of which were useful for us among the goyim, so long as they were independent, but are not desirable under our rule. How clear is the undeveloped power of thought of the purely brute brains of the goyim, as expressed in the fact that they have been borrowing from us without payment of interest, without ever thinking that all these same monies plus an additional for payment of interest must be got by them for their own state pockets in order to settle up with us? What could have been simpler than to take the money they wanted from their own people? But it is a proof of the genius of our chosen mind that we have contrived to present the matter of loans to them in such a light that they have even seen in them an advantage for themselves. Our accounts, which we shall present when the time comes in the light of centuries of experiences gained by experiments made by us on the Goy states, will be distinguished by clearness, definitiveness, and will show at a glance to all men the advantage of our innovations. They will put an end to those abuses in which we owe our mastery over the goyim, but which cannot be allowed in our kingdom. We shall so hedge about our systems and accounting that neither the rulers nor the most insignificant public servant will be in a position to divert even the smallest sums from its destination without detection, or to direct it in another direction, except that which will be fixed in a definite plan of action. And without a definite plan, it is impossible to rule. Marching along an undetermined road with an undetermined resources brings to ruin by way of heroes and demigods. The Goy rulers, whom were once upon a time advised should be distracted from state occupations by representative receptions, observances of etiquette, entertainment, were only screens for our rule. The accounts of favorite courtiers who replaced them in the sphere of affairs were drawn up for them by our agents, and every time gave satisfaction to short-sighted minds by promises that in the future economies and improvements were foreseen. Economies from what? New taxes? Were questions that might have been asked, but were not asked by those who read our accounts and projects. You know to what have been brought by this carelessness. You know to what they have been brought by this carelessness, to what pitch of financial disorder they have arrived, notwithstanding the astonishing industry of their peoples. Wow, this keeps going. 21. To what I reported to you at the last meeting, I shall now add detailed explanation of internal loans, of foreign loans. I shall say nothing more, but because they have fed us with the national monies of the Goyim, but our state, there will be no foreigners. That is nothing external. We have taken advantage of the venality of administrations and slackness of rulers to get our monies twice, thrice, and more times over by lending to the Goy governments monies which were not at all needed by the states. Could anyone do the like in regard to us? Therefore, I shall only deal with the details of internal loans. States announce that such a loan is to be concluded with an open subscription for their own bills of exchange, that is, for the interest-bearing paper. But they may be within the reach of all. The price is determined at from 100 to 1,000, and a discount is made for the earliest subscribers. Next day, by artificial means, the price of them goes up. The alleged reason being that everyone is rushing to buy them. In a few days, the treasury safes are, as they say, overflowing, and there's more money than they can do with. The subscription, it is alleged, covers many times over the issue total of the loan, and in this lies the whole stage effect. Look, you, they say, what confidence is shown in the government's bill of exchange? But when the comedy is played out, there emerges the fact that a debit and an exceedingly burdensome debit has been created. For the payment of interest, it becomes necessary to have recourse to new loans, which do not swallow up, but only add to the capital debt. And when this credit is exhausted, it becomes necessary by new taxes to cover not the loan, but only the interest on it. These taxes are a debit employed to cover a debit. They call that balancing the budget. Later comes a time for conversions, but they diminish the payment of the interest without covering the debt. And besides, they cannot be made without the consent of the lenders. On announcing a conversion, a proposal is made to return the money for those who are not willing to convert their paper. If everybody expressed his unwillingness and demanded his money back, the government would hoist on its own petard and would be found insolvent and be unable to pay the proposed sums. By good luck, the subjects of the Goy governments, knowing nothing about financial affairs, have always preferred losses on exchanges and diminution of interest to the risk of new investment on their monies, and have thereby many a time enabled these governments to throw off their shoulders a debit of several millions. Nowadays, with external loans, these tricks cannot be placed on the Goyim, for they know that we shall demand our money back. In this way, an acknowledged bankruptcy will best prove the various countries the absence of any means between the interest of the peoples and those who rule them. I beg you to concentrate your particular attention upon this point and upon the following. Nowadays, all the internal loans are consolidated by so-called flying loans, that is, such as have terms of payment more or less near. These debts consist of monies paid into the saving banks and reserve funds. If left for long at the disposition of the government, these funds evaporate in the payment of interest on foreign loans and are placed by the deposit of equivalent amounts of rents. And these last it is which patch up the leaks of the state treasuries of the Goyim. When we ascend to the throne of the world, all these financials and similar shifts that are not in accord with our interests will be swept away and as to not leave a trace, and will be destroyed. And also will be destroyed all money markets, since we shall not allow the prestige of our power to be shaken by fluctuations of prices set upon our values. which we shall announce by law at the price which represents their full worth without any possibility of lowering or raising. We shall replace the money markets by grandiose government credit institutions, the object of which will be to fix the price of industrial values in accordance with the government view. These institutions will be in a position to fling upon the market 500 million of industrial paper in one day, or to buy up the same amount. In this way, all industrial undertakings will come into dependence upon us. Oh my gosh, you guys, we are so down there, but I am running out. Okay, we're almost done. Let me just go through it here. 23, that the peoples may become accustomed to obedience. It is necessary to inoculate lessons of humility and therefore to reduce the production of articles of luxury. By this we shall improve morale, which will have been debased by the emulation in the sphere of luxury. We shall reestablish small master production, which means laying a mine under the private capital of manufacturers. This is indispensable also for the reason that manufacturers on the grand scale, often more, though through not always consciously, through the thoughts of the masses in direction against the government. These people of small masters know nothing out of unemployment, and this binds them closely with existing order and consequently with the firmness of authority. For us, its part will have been played out the moment authority is transferred into our hands. Drunkenness will also be prohibited by law and punishable as a crime against the humanness of man who is turned into a brute under the influence of alcohol. Subjects, I repeat once more, give blind obedience only to the strong hand, which is absolutely independent from them, for in it they will feel the sword of defense and the support against social scourges. What do they want with an angelic spirit in a king? What they have to see in him is the personification of force and power, the supreme Lord who will replace all now existing rulers, dragging in their existence among societies demoralized by us, societies that have denied even the authority of God, from whose midst breeds out of all sides the fire of anarchy, must first all proceed to quench this all-devouring flame. Therefore, he will be obligated to kill off those existing societies, though he should drench them with his own blood, that he may resurrect them again in the form of regularly organized troops, fighting consciously with every kind of infection that may cover the body of state with sores. This chosen one of God is chosen from above to demolish the senseless forces moved by instinct and not reason, by brutishness and not humanness. These forces now triumph in manifestation of robbery and every kind of violence under the mask of principles of freedoms and rights. They have overthrown all forms of social order to erect on the ruins of the throne of the King of the Jews, but their part will be played out the moment he enters into his kingdom. Then it will be necessary to sweep away from his path, on which must be left no knot, no splinter. Then will it be possible for us to say to the peoples of the world, give thanks to God and bow the knee before him who bears on his front the seal of the predestination of man, to which God himself has led his star, and that none other but him might free us from all the before mentioned forces of evil. And the final protocol. I pass now to the method of confirming the dynastic roots of King David to the last strata of earth. This confirmation will first and foremost be included that to this day has rested the force of conservatism by our learned elders of the conduct of the affairs of the world in the directing of this education through all humanity. Certain members of the seed of David will prepare the kings of their heirs, selecting not by right of heritage, but by eminent capacities, inducting them into the most secret mysteries of the political, into schemes of government, but providing always that none may come to knowledge of the secrets. The objects of this mode of action is that all may know that governments cannot be entrusted to those who have not been inducted into the secret places in this art. To these persons only will be taught the practical applications of the aforementioned plans by comparison of the experiences of many centuries. All the observations on this political, economic moves, and social sciences. In a word, all the spirit of laws which have been unshakably established by nature herself for the regulation of the relations of humanity. Direct heirs will often be set aside from ascending the throne if their time of training they exhibit frivolity, softness, and other qualities which are the ruin of authority, which render them incapable of governing and in themselves dangerous for kingly office. Only those who are unconditionally capable for firm, even if it be to cruelty, direct rule, will receive the reins of rule from our learned elders. In case of a falling stick of weakness of will and other forms of incapacity, kings must by law hand over the reins of rule to new and capable hands. A king's plan of action for the current moment, for all the more so for the future, will be unknown, even to those who are his closest counselors. The King of the Jews. Only the king and the three who stood sponsor for him will know what is coming. In the person of the king, who will be unbending, will master of himself and all humanity, all will discern as if it were fate with its mysterious ways. None will know what the king wishes to attain by his dispositions, and therefore none will dare to stand across an unknown path. It is understood that the brain reservoir of the king must correspond in capacity to the plan of government it has to contain. It is for this reason that he will ascend the throne, not otherwise than after examination of his mind by the aforesaid learned elders. That the people may know and love their king, it is indispensable for him to converse in the marketplace with his people. This ensures the necessary clinching of two forces which are now divided, one from another by us, by the terror. This terror was indispensable for us till the time comes for both these forces separately to fall under our influence. The King of the Jews must not be at the mercy of his passions, and especially of sensuality. On no side of his character must he give brute instincts power over his mind. Sensuality, worse than all else, disorganizes the capacities of the mind and clearness of views, distracting the thoughts to the worst and most brutal side of human activity. The prop of humanity in the person of the Supreme Lord of all the world, of the Holy See of David, must sacrifice to his people all personal inclinations. Our Supreme Lord must be an example of irreproachability. And that is it. And I am alone. I'm going to add Richard back in here. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I am totally beat, of course. Richard, were you listening? Unmute.
Yeah, hi.
Did you hear the end of it?
Yeah. It was just, it was a bit of a delay right this second, but yeah. I'm sorry, I lost my internet connection. I was shuffling some things around, and I knocked the power out of the...
You and Graham both. Anyway, we've only got about 12 minutes before the end of the hour. And, of course, I'm going to have to, stop for a few minutes myself. I don't know if you want to try to get Graham back in here or what. I know Terry's out there probably. She'd like to get in here. But I got to, turn you loose for a while if you're interested in doing it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't know if Graham he might have retired for the night.
I think he lost his internet. He could have fallen asleep and retired. It's 4:20 over. No. What time is it over there? I can't tell.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's almost 5, I think. Yeah, where he is.
Yeah. Poor guy. He's probably got to work too. All right. Yeah. Whoop. All right.
Yeah. No. Well, when you had me come in for a couple minutes earlier, I was mentioning some people have claimed this a forgery, but you have to put it in perspective. I mean, this is come more into fruition since the time it was written, even, you know? I mean, this is like everything mentioned in there is getting ramped up more.
Well, you know what they call it? They call it plagiarism. You know, I've heard them call it plagiarizing is when you rip it off from somebody else. Who'd they rip it off from? You know, yeah, everything they say to try to knock it down props it back up. Are you guys interested in hanging around for a while? Because I gotta I'm not gonna drop the server, of course, but I gotta step away for a few minutes.
Hi, Terry. Are you awake?
How are you doing?
Talk? Good. Are you?
All right, let me just go ahead and end my show here, okay?
Okay.
All
All right, everybody just quiet. All right. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to hold the server, but I'm going to stop the recording. But again, that was we finally made it through the protocols, and I'll do my best to get this up and edit it and put it into some sort of a concise thing. But if you guys want to hear more or you have questions, you're going to need to get back, and we'll figure out how we're going to, what our next step is, how we're going to, if we need to review or what. Anyway, but I personally have to decompress for a little while, so it's all yours. But I do want to, let me just look and see who all we got listening right now. No, we still got a bunch of people. Oh, hello, everybody. Let me just look here. Yeah, okay. All you listeners, I guess you're going to stick around for a little while. Give me about 20 minutes if you can, because my throat is wasted, and I have to relax for a few. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end it, but all I'm going to do is stop the recording. Okay, so with that, I'm going to say this is the Stephen D. Kelley Show. My name is Stephen D. Kelley. You've been listening to Truth Cat Radio. It is still Thursday. Actually, no, it's midnight over on the East Coast, but it was August 31st, 2017. And again, this is Stephen D. Kelley Show, and you're listening to Truth Cat Radio, and we want to thank you very much. So I'm going to say good night, God bless, adios, and goodbye.